Greetings, 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 halito, hiya, and welcome. Welcome to Califia X channel, here to add my part in the process of the upliftment, the enrichment, edification, and healing of all Aborigine, originals, autonomous peoples of the Americas at home and abroad, currently lost at sea, it would seem, drowning in a sea of media and propaganda. And haven't they been bombarding us lately? Really? I mean, who is Jussie Smollett? This is the trending news. Now, if you saw my last video on social engineering, then you should be able to recognize social engineering when it's happening real time. So let's look at some of the top news about this story, since we're dealing with lying. Clearly, you can see a people not only divided, but very emotionally charged. So let's see what the media is doing. So he staged a hoax over his salary, says the BBC. That was a couple of hours ago. He staged an attack because he was unhappy with his salary, the police say. That's from The Guardian. And then 17 minutes ago, Trump says Jussie Smollett targets Jussie Smollett over what police say was a fake attack. Live updates. So you can actually be keeping up with this as it's going along. And of course Twitter is awash with information as well. So you have a third of the people here saying basically you're a racist, and sort of begging for his head, or at least some prison time. Then you have these people here who are saying, well, you know, at the end of the day, what's happening about the patrol patties who have been wasting police time? So if this guy's being prosecuted, why aren't they? Because we've had a slurry of people calling the police for no absolute reason on, and I'm not going to say black folks, the autonomous Aborigines of the Americas. And then of course we've got the other third who was saying, oh well, you know, when we came here, we made this land absolutely wonderful and fantastic. We didn't genocide the people who are here already. We're not denying those people anything whatsoever. Stop telling lies, because it never happened. It just absolutely never happened. So, don't you think the powers that be are not fully aware that this type of event, real or not, does exactly what they want? Are we not all diverted and arguing at the moment? So, join me as I explore recent research on lying as revealed by two prominent media outlets who would be considered authorities in the area of psychology. That's Psychology Today and National Geographic. I'm going to be breaking down some of the NLP tactics that they use. NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. And we're going to be looking at the new research that they are revealing to us about why we lie. So join me as we venture down this particular labyrinth, rabbit hole of lies. So here we are on Etymon, and we're having a quick look at lie. And we're not going to spend too long on this because we're all familiar with the fact that lie means two things: to speak falsely and to lie down. Here we see how it actually morphed, strangely enough, around the 13th century. So it's two verbs, meaning speak falsely, tell an untruth for the purpose of misleading, which was the late 12th century that started, and it originated from words like ligan, ligan, etc. We seem to notice as well that it has a North European origin, because all of the references to the word are either Old Frisian, Old Norse, Old High German, Russian even, and Old Church Slavonic, which is where they think the root comes. However, it's not found in Latin, Greek or Sanskrit, so it's a word of uncertain etymology. They say it's has possible cognates in Old Church Slavonic. As a second verb, it meant to rest horizontally, being a recumbent position. That was the early 12th century, and that was from English. We still see its Proto-Germanic, Old Saxon, Old Frisian, etc. roots, and then we see it comes from the pi, lay, to lay down, especially to lie in bed, hence often with sexual implications, as in lie with, have sexual intercourse, 13th century, and compare Old English lik gan mid, to cohabit with, to lie in, be brought to childbed from mid-15th century. To lie to at sea is to come to a standstill, and to take something, lying down, to receive passively, receive with abject submission, happened around 1854. Now I'm actually going to show you a clip of a movie that I've seen in reference to one particular type of social engineering, but I wonder if you can recognize a few more, and I wonder if you can kind of tie in the timeline, which in all honesty I didn't see until I looked up the word. So take a look and see if you can see what I see.
Trouble with Scotland is that it's full of Scots. Perhaps the time has come to reinstitute an old custom. Perhaps then, prima facie. First night, when any common girl had it in their hands to marry, our nobles have sexually taxed her for the night of the grave. We can't get them up. They breathe them up. That should fetch just the kind of lords we want to consult. Taxes or no tax, lads.
A most excellent idea, sire.
Is it?
This is a look at Braveheart in reference to the clip that we just saw, and back to Etimon, and it's really just, as I say, not overly looking at timelines and getting caught up in timelines, but just looking at historically what was going on. I think a lot of people are familiar with Braveheart, 1995 movie with Mel Gibson. We saw the word lie move and morph from meaning lying down to having sexual connotations around the late 12th century. And if you remember in the movie, the king was actually saying that they were reenacting prima nocte. So this was clearly something that kings seemed to be doing as a part of their conquest. Of course, you've got the social engineering that was going on in France as well, because there was a war going on in France, and that was the king's way of inveigling and enticing his men from France over into Scotland. And it's quite interesting, the whole breed them out aspect of what he was talking about, because you're changing the people from what to what. And that's the question. I think also you've got some really covert and sort of insidious land grabbing going on there, because that first child could possibly not be the father or the couple, the father, the man of the couple. That child could possibly not be his. So you've got that child then being mixed with the invader, and the invader through the mother with the child having the possibility of having some sort of a land grab. And then of course you've got that child potentially there, you've got like all the sort of situations there for all kinds of things to happen with regards to sort of blackmailing and coercion and incentivizing people to behave in all manner of ways. So that was quite interesting, and as I say, really interesting to see what was happening in Scotland, what was happening in France, and who was being changed, who was being moved out of France. And because obviously the people who could get away are going to flee, those who won't assimilate are going to die. The same thing in Scotland. So who was being changed from what to who? Interesting. This is the truth about lying. Deception is rampant, and sometimes we tell the biggest lies to those we love the most. This is by Alison Cornet, published May the 1st, 1997, reviewed again June the 9th, 2016, and you'll see that the National Geographic article was actually rewritten again exactly a year later, June 2017. And Alison starts off with a very bold statement here. If, as the cliche has it, the 1980s was a decade of greed, then the quintessential sin of the 1990s might just have been lying. After all, think of the accusations of deceit levelled at politicians like Bob Packwood, Marion Barry, Dan Rostenkowski, Newt Gingrich and Bill Clinton, and consider the top-level Texaco executives who initially denied making racist comments at board meetings, the young monk who falsely accused Cardinal Bernardin of molestation, Susan Smith, the white woman who killed her young boys and blamed a black man for it, and Joe Klein, the Newsweek columnist who adamantly swore for months that he had nothing to do with his anonymously published novel Primary Colours. Even Hollywood noticed our apparent deception obsession. Witness films like Quiz Show, True Lies, The Crucible, Secret and Lies, and Liar Liar. So of course she's grabbed you straight away, and there's all kinds of emotional triggers there, because if you're not sort of triggered by the various politicians that have been lying, you've got the executives, you've got the race card being thrown in there, and then of course you've got your sort of famous people who are on TV, and if they didn't grab you, then of course you've got the movies. So emotional grab there straight away. So you're going to carry on reading, so let's run through it, because straight away you see there's a almost like a deflection tactic straight away, because then they go on to talk about lies being part of everyday life, according to Leonard Saxer, PhD, polygraph expert and professor of psychology at Brandeis University. We couldn't get through the day without it, he says, without being deceptive. Until recently, lying was almost entirely ignored by psychologists apparently, leaving serious discussion of the topic in the hands of ethicists and theologians. Freud, and I can't stand that name because it looks too much like fraud, I'm sorry, which it probably is, because I think the whole thing about psychology is a bit weird anyway when you look at how it all started up. But in his 15-page Encyclopedia of Psychology, which was published in 1984, he mentions only a brief entry on lies, and it's about detecting them. But psychologists have actually started to delve deeper into the details of deception, and they're finding it's a surprisingly common and complex phenomenon. This is where we see that Bella DePaolo seems to be the core psychologist that has done the main research on lying, and she actually confirms Nietzsche's assertion that the lie is a condition of life. And in 1996, with her colleagues, they studied 147 people between the ages of 18 and 71. They all had to keep a diary of the falsehoods that they told over the course of a week. Most people, she found, lied only once. I don't know why I say only. Most people, she found, lie once or twice a day, almost as often as they snack from the refrigerator or brush their teeth. Both men and women lie in approximately a fifth of their social exchanges, lasting 10 or more minutes. Over the course of a week, they deceive about 30% of those with whom they interact one-to-one. Furthermore, some types of relationships, such as those between parents and teens, are virtual magnets for deception. College students lie to their mothers in 1 out of 2 conversations. That's 50%. That's kind of high. Incidentally, this is where they qualify what the lie is. They don't include mindless pleasantries like polite evocations we offer each other in passing, such as "I'm fine, thanks," when we really feel horrible, or "no trouble at all" when we have really been put out. An official lie actually misleads or deliberately conveying a false impression. So when you compliment your friend's awful haircut, or telling a creditor that the check is in the mail and it's not, that would qualify as a lie. Both of them would qualify as a lie. Saxa also points out that most of us actually receive conflicting messages about lying. Although we're socialized from the time we can speak to believe that it's always better to tell the truth, in reality, society often encourages and even rewards deception. Show up late for an early morning meeting at work, and it's best not to admit that you overslept. You're punished far more than you would be if you lie and say you were stuck in traffic, Saxa notes. Moreover, lying is integral to many occupations. Think how often we see lawyers constructing far-fetched theories on behalf of their clients, or reporters misrepresenting themselves in order to gain access to good stories. Then they go on to look at relationships. And I don't know why I have such a problem with this section, but I do. Alright, dishonesty also pervades our romantic relationships, as you might expect, from titles of books like 101 Lies Men Tell Women, HarperCollins, by Missouri psychologist Dori Hollander, PhD. Hollander's nomination for the #1 spot, I'll Call You. 85% of couples interviewed in a 1990 study of college students. Notice there's a lot of college students here. I mean, how much are they the atypical part of society? But they reported that one or both partners had lied about past relationships or recent indiscretions. And DiPaolo finds that dating couples lie to each other in about a third of their interactions, perhaps even more often than they deceive other people. This is why I'd be interested to find out what questions they're asking, because I know lies come in very many varying formats, but college students are usually just about out finding themselves, and I don't know if they're atypical in society to say that that sample that they use there would be atypical of everybody. Anyway, she goes on to say that marriage seems to offer some protection against deception, and spouses lie to each other in only about 10% of their major conversations. The bad news? The 10% that refers to the typically minor lies of everyday life. DiPaolo recently began looking at the less frequent big lies that involve deep betrayals of trust, and she's finding that the vast majority of them occur between people in intimate relationships. You save your really big lies, she says, for the person that you're closest to. Alright, now she's looking at less frequent big lies that involve deep betrayals of what? Trust. For me, and maybe this is what I have issue with, because about the whole thing about this is that relationships, any relationships that mean anything to you or me or any individual, has actually been built on some level of trust. Whether that's a business relationship, an associate, a friend, a really close friend, or someone that you're having an intimate relationship with, in that it's intimate. So that saving your really big lies is almost as if that lie was there from the very beginning. And I'm not saying that some lies aren't there from the very beginning, because again it depends on what the lie is. But that suggestion that the big lies are kind of kept in a chest and because they're saved up, there's just something just ill about that. And I can't put my finger on exactly what it is. but it just doesn't ring right to me, because the only people who can deeply betray you are the people who you trust, because they're the people that you've opened up to. So, even if you were scammed in a sort of a Bernie Madoff type Ponzi scheme thing, then a lot of times you've been introduced by somebody that it's somebody close to you. So I do understand that is also a deep betrayal on many levels, but there's just something kind of wrong about the way that she's just said you save your really big lies for the person that you're closest to. Maybe your big lies can devastate the person that you're closest to is more apt, rather than saying we save them. And I think maybe we do save them because we know what it's going to do to the other person. So I just think it's just a weird kind of inversion, because that she then now goes on to talk about the fact that we don't, there are some lies that will cause interpersonal frictions, but there are others that will serve as a kind of harmless lubricant, and I'm pretty sure they're the ones where we're telling each other nice things because we don't want to hurt each other's feelings. And here she says it, they make it easier for people to get along, says De Paolo. Noted that in the diary study, 1 in every 4 of the participants' lies were solely for the benefit of the other person. Fake positive lies, those in which people pretend to like someone or something more than they actually do, your muffins are the best ever, are about 10 to 20 times more common than false negative lies in which people pretend to like someone or something less. That two-faced rat will never get my vote, as an example. And that, again, going on to talk about kind lies. And they look at the cultural differences, and notice a lot of these words like may, perhaps, and things like this, because that's an indication that they don't know. And the more we read through this, what should be coming to you is that this is like false evidence appearing real. We've already looked at the fact that they seem to be talking mostly to students. The whole way that the family thing was worded about intimate relationships and saving their biggest lies for the people that you love the most is just doesn't make sense, because you build trust. That's what relationships about. You've built trust and you've built respect, so there's love there, so again, you see, they're going on to talk about, let me go back up to here, because this is where they talk about the cultural lies, which I think this is quite interesting. A survey at the Senior Citizen Center in Los Angeles recently revealed that only about half of elderly Korean Americans believe that patients diagnosed with life-threatening metastatic cancer should be told the truth about their condition. In contrast, nearly 90% of Americans of European or African, got that assumption there, descendants felt that the terminally ill should be confronted with the truth. And it's quite interesting what they go on to say later on about depressed people, which I'll go into that when we come to it. But again, they go on to just keep on saying, as you notice, that the closer we are to someone, the more likely it is that the lies we tell them will be altruistic ones. And it's particularly true of women. The sexes tend to lie with equal frequency, but women are especially likely to stretch the truth in order to protect someone else's feelings. Men, on the other hand, are more prone to lying about themselves. The typical conversation between two guys contains about 8 times as many self-oriented lies as it does falsehoods about other people. So they're not really there gossiping, they're just really there like trying to big up themselves, really. Men and women may also, see, there's that may again, also differ in their ability to deceive their friends. In a University of Virginia study, psychologists asked pairs of same-sex friends to try to detect lies told by the other person. 6 months later, the researchers repeated the experiment with the same participants. While women had become slightly better at detecting their friends' lies over time, men didn't show any improvement. Evidence perhaps that women are particularly good at learning to read their friends more accurately as a relationship deepens. This is when it goes on to talk about who lies actually. Saxer believes that anyone under enough pressure or given enough incentive will lie. But in a study published in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, DePaolo and Deborah A. Cashy, PhD of Texas A&M University, report that frequent liars tend to be manipulative and Machiavellian, not to mention overly concerned with the impression they make on others. And this is probably one of the very few mentions about the manipulative Machiavellian types. The sociopaths, the psychopaths, the Shakespeare's Iago whispering in your ear. You see, there's no mention of these people, and I'm quite surprised because it's psychology today. They deal with a man, so they'll be looking at the brain, they'll be looking at various aspects of the brain and how the brain works. When you consider, I have a series of videos called What the Bleep. They came out around 2006, I believe, and they completely deal with quantum physics. And in there, it's all about the brain. Not everything is about the brain, but there's so much in there about the brain, about the endorphins that we actually produce. As I said, it's about quantum physics. So what they do actually is they have a movie going on during the scientists talking and giving you various examples of what they mean. But there's a particular bit in it that's quite funny in a way, where, because they're visually trying to get you to understand the scientific part of what they're saying, where you see these people dancing around in this wedding, and they're all connected up to their drips, because it's actually really saying that we're just this biosuit of our chemical emotions, because every emotion that we have produces some type of a chemical, some kind of endorphin, something that can get us high, even though it might be the fact that we're stuffing down food or we feel victimized. It's still an emotion, or we lie. It's an emotion, and this is what I find strange about. There's no mention any of this research in this particular article, not even a link to another article that would take you to give you that type of information, which I find quite surprising actually. Because again, they're doing this drip thing where they just seem to be encouraging people to lie, because DePaolo then goes on to say that liars don't always fit the stereotype of only caring about themselves, and that extroverted, sociable people are slightly more likely to lie, and that some personality and physical traits, notably self-confidence and physical attractiveness, have been linked to an individual's skill at lying when under pressure. Now, I would say the fact that she's calling it a skill means they're good at it. Are they really good at it, or is it because they are attractive? And we tend not to listen when people talk, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing videos like this, is to get us to sort of really pay attention to what's being said. A lot of times it's what we want to hear, and because they're attractive, we're not really paying the right attention. So, on the other hand, the people who are least likely to lie are those who score high on psychological scales of responsibility, and those with meaningful same-sex friendships. In his book Lies, 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 The Psychology of Deceit, American Psychiatric Press Inc., psychiatrist Charles Ford, MD, adds depressed people to that list. He suggests that individuals in the throes of depression seldom deceive others or are deceived themselves, because they seem to perceive and describe reality with greater accuracy than others. Several studies show that depressed people delude themselves far less than their non-depressed peers about the amount of control they have over situations, and also about the effect they have on other people. Now that's quite interesting, because you noticed earlier when they were talking about the health and who wants to be told about sort of life-threatening illnesses, the so-called African Americans, the Aborigini, originals of the land, suggested 90% said, yeah, let me know, are we depressed? Yeah, of course we're depressed. Who wouldn't be? But on the one hand, it does kind of make us more real, don't you think? We're not quite so bamboozled by the bangs, guns, whistles and bombs that are around us all the time, and the Jussie Smollets as well. And they say that European Americans are pretty depressed too, but hey, didn't they run away from Europe? So that's not surprising at all. But then, of course, we have a so-called authority, because remember, these people are supposed to be PhDs and all kinds of stuff, all kinds of letters and etc. after their name. But Shelley Taylor actually, because of the research about depressed people, I mean, I'm not saying depression is good on any level, but as I said, being Pollyanna about it, depressed people are just more real, because they don't delude themselves. They perceive and describe reality with greater accuracy than others. That kind of sounds like a better place to be than where Shelley Taylor wants to place us, because she has actually cited that the findings about the depressed people is good reason. It's not even reason, it's essential to good mental health, actually, a certain amount of self-delusion, lying to yourself. Really? I mean, I don't have a PhD in psychology, but this woman must really need to pay her mortgage, or she wants a new holiday in Barbados or something, because this does not make sense in any shape or form to say that to lie to yourself is a part of good mental health. Perhaps it's because they've been lying to us for so long, they're just trying to find some kind of weird way to shove it down our throats and for us to accept it, because this is just asinine to me. There's a big difference between having a healthy attitude of self. There's a big difference between having healthy knowledge of self. This is why all of this just starts to appear like false evidence appearing real, because who in their right mind is going to suggest to anybody that it's a good idea to be delusional, self-delusional? Let's forget about all the people who actually have to live with you in your self-delusion, and when you get older and you fall apart mentally because you have your self-delusional, it's the people that you've been trying to delude all of your life, including yourself, that you're going to have to rely on to pick up the pieces of what a broken person, as we see here. And I'm glad she put this in brackets. Many playwrights, including Arthur Miller and Eugene O'Neill, seem to share the same view about truth-telling. In Death of a Salesman and The Iceman Cometh, for example, lies are self-sustaining. The heroes become tragic figures when their lies are stripped away. Let's just go back on that. They're not heroes after they've become tragic figures now, are they? Oh, wow. This is when they go on to talk about detecting lies and how difficult it is to detect lies, really. And the polygraph test is just really, as Jeffrey C. Bunn says, PhD and psychologist and polygraph historian, no less, at Canada's York University, describes a lie detector as an entertainment device rather than a scientific instrument. It was created around 1921 during one of the first collaborations between scientists and police. The device was quickly popularized by enthusiastic newspaper headlines and by the element of drama it bestowed in movies and novels. And of course here we see the media just creating more of themselves, little clones of people who have just jumped on the bandwagon to say that this instrument, which is not scientifically sound, has just created more advertising for them, because the news is just going to have more elements of drama in it. All types of script writers and movie writers, they're all happy thinking that man has just fallen from heaven all of a sudden. Mass appeal doesn't confer legitimacy. The problem with the polygraph, says experts like Bunn, is that it detects fear, not lying. The physiological responses that it measures, most often heart rate, skin conductivity and rate of respiration, doesn't necessarily accompany dishonesty. The premise of a lie detector is that a smoke alarm goes off in the brain when we lie because we're doing something wrong, explains Saxa, but sometimes we're completely comfortable with our lies. Thus, a criminal's lie can easily go undetected if he or she has no fear of telling it. Similarly, a true statement by an innocent individual could be misinterpreted if the person is sufficiently afraid of the examination circumstances. According to Saxa, the best controlled research suggests that lie detectors err at a rate anywhere from 25 to 75%. Perhaps this is why most state and federal courts won't allow polygraph evidence. And notice again it says most don't. This is when they go on to talk about, this is where you actually get into a little bit of NLP, because they talk about being able to recognize, because language just isn't about just the spoken word, it's also about that communication that we have in our body language. And this is why a lot of the scammers can get away with stuff over the phone, because there isn't that eye-to-eye contact. But what they're trying to do is look at adaptive habits like scratching, blinking, fidgeting. One of the things they don't mention is that when you're recalling something from memory, apparently you look up, and when you're lying or you're telling a story, you look in different directions, look down, that type of thing. They're also looking at language patterns that are associated with improvements in physical health, and James W. Panbecker, PhD, a professor of psychology at Southern Methodist University, began to explore whether a person's choice of words was a sign of deception. They examined data that they gathered from text analysis, and they actually found that certain language patterns that predict when someone is being less honest, but again, it's not a complete, yes, he's definitely lying. But they say that liars tend to use fewer first-person words like I or my in both speech and writing, less apt to use emotional words such as hurt or angry, cognitive words like understand or realise, and so-called exclusive words such as but or without, that distinguish between what is and isn't a category. But do a writing course, and most of those words they'll tell you that you shouldn't really use, because people won't be reading the story. So this is how it kind of ends now. We're just going on the wind up. While the picture of lying that has emerged in recent years is far more favourable than suggested by its biblical thou shalt not status, most liars remain at least somewhat conflicted about their behaviour. In DiPaolo's studies, participants described conversations in which they lied as less intimate and pleasant than truthful encounters, suggesting that people are not entirely at ease with their deceptions. This may explain why falsehoods are more likely to be told over the telephone. So we've just gone through that, so we can skip that bit out. Because then she then goes on to say that in most cases, however, any mental distresses that result from telling an everyday lie quickly dissipates. Those who took part in the diary study said they would tell about 75% of their lies again if given a second chance, a position no doubt bolstered by their generally high success rate. Only about 1/5 of their falsehoods were discovered during the 1-week study period. And this is what I'm talking about, the addictive sort of nature of lying. And although we are just looking at innocuous lies, which don't really hurt anybody, I'm sure there might be a percentage of those people who perhaps did the study who might go on to tell bigger lies, more hurtful lies. And as I mentioned, no mention of the sociopaths and the psychopaths who will just go to bed and sleep regardless of who they've hurt. Certainly, anyone who insists on condemning all lies should ponder what would happen if we could reliably tell when our family, friends, colleagues and government leaders were deceiving us. It's tempting to think that the world would become a better place when purged of the deceptions that seem to interfere with our attempts at genuine communication or intimacy. On the other hand, perhaps our social lives would collapse under the weight of relentless honesty with unveiled truths, destroying our ability to connect with others. The ubiquity of lying is clearly a problem, but would we want to will away all of our lies? Let's be honest. Well, Alison, I have to be honest because guess what? I cannot tell a lie. And actually, yep, life would definitely get better for a lot of people. I'm not talking about you and me necessarily and the silly little lies we tell each other in order just to make everything just more tolerable and to save each other's feelings. I'm not talking about those lies at all. I'm talking about the sociopaths, the psychopaths, all those people that you gave reference to at the top of your article, but actually gave us no information about their brains whatsoever. It takes someone like me to sort of say, well, hang on a minute, what's going on here? Why isn't it there? Because we know that there are 3 areas of the brain that get lit up when people lie. We know that there are certain people that, you know, when it comes to lying, their brains are connected up slightly differently. You and I will have a limit as to what and how many lies, what type of lies we'll tell, how many lies we're going to tell, but these people don't. These people don't. And see, this is the issue. This is the issue. You know, be quite interesting to see what you think about the information that's here. We're just going to go do a quick wrap up now, but as I say, false evidence appearing real, because at the end of the day, let's just consider this very, very quickly. The majority of us have been socially engineered to be living where we are right now. You have to think about that. When you picked up yourself to leave the area where you were leaving, why did you leave? You know, there's probably stuff going on around you that made you think, can't live here anymore, regardless of what it was. But that's a way you picked yourself up. Some people have ancestrally picked themselves up from their ancestral homes. So, let me know what you think anyway. Wrap up time now. Wrap up time. I know it's a bit distressing, some of the images that you saw, but remember, we're keeping emotion out of this and we're actually studying the studiers. And when we do study them, I think we notice that we do have actually some cause for concern. No, the studiers are the scientists, you know, the psychologists. And when you actually look and see, they've actually performed some pretty heinous acts on individuals, to the point it would appear from their own studies on the brain that they're wired up differently from their own studies, and they appear to be displaying the characteristics of sociopaths, narcissists, psychopaths, who like or even enjoy manipulating large groups of people for their own ends, regardless of what it is. Witness an inversion in many ways that the media decides that information is distributed among the peoples to get emotional responses that leave us mentally paralyzed through either fear or anger or feelings of powerlessness, you know, unable to make decisions or to make changes, either because we're angry with an oppressor or scared of them, and also because it allows those who actually adhere to the theories to believe that they have some sort of authority over others and they can actually dictate how others live and if they should live even. You know, it was very interesting to see and to look at the innocuous lies that we tell that actually lubricate their system, that maintains it, while ignoring the more unhinged characters that actually raise to prominence in society and whose lies actually can affect us on a daily basis, usually to the negative, because, let's remember, their imaginations drive their science. So this whole out of Africa theory leads to social Darwinism, and that just leads down an even darker labyrinth of eugenics and characters like Walter Plecker and Margaret Sangster. Oh, of course we've got Bill Gates, our latter-day eugenicists. That group totally believes that we evolved from a monkey, so there is no higher power, no soul, just animal. And you've got another group that just believe we're machine, which is totally reflected in the way that we're treated, as seen here with the information that I provided. And it's actually going to be in my next video as well, after reviewing the National Geographic article with new research on how the brain actually works and how it's actually wired up, So going back to the article now, even when you were dealing with couples, with our relationships, what you saw was that they were saying things like, we save our best lives for those we care about the most, which seemed quite asinine to me, because let's look at what relationships are built from. They're usually built from trust and respect. I would actually say that they're the cornerstones for any type of a relationship that you're going to have that's going to mean anything to you. Friendships, even business relationships. When it comes to married partners now, or couples who stay together as a married couple, that's an intimate relationship where a lot of trust and a lot of respect has been built up. So what I found was really strange, and it was bugging me what it was that was bothering me about that statement. And I think it was really because I understand in many ways a marriage can actually be compared to a business relationship, but we were looking at lying. And, she said, we save the biggest lies for those we care about the most. And I thought, no, it just didn't ring true to me. I thought, okay, if you got caught up in a Bernie Madoff Ponzi scheme or something, then yeah, because that's a betrayal. But that's a betrayal of your pocket, that's a betrayal of your bank book, and possibly a betrayal of your future. But to say that it was saved up in a chest for marriage implied that the lie was always there. That would apply with a kind of a Ponzi scheme that had gone very, very wrong, because obviously you're going to lose your money. And a lot of times you are introduced to those sort of multi-level marketing schemes by people that you know, by friends, not necessarily your business, your marriage partner though. So I did think that was a strange analogy to sort of pop in there, because we were looking at marriages. If they were talking about lies altogether, then they should have differentiated between, the marriage and the marriage lies and the betrayals in business partnership lies, because I felt that that's what that reference was about. It had little to do with married couples. So I hope I have actually managed to show you how on many levels we're coerced into acting emotionally when the information and how the information is actually delivered to us by authority figures. And ethical or not, don't think that they don't use the data that they gathered from those experiments to manipulate people at some time in the future. And I hope you also paid attention to those experiments that actually dealt with how we, as a people, as a group, react to authority figures, so-called authority figures. So at the end of the day, we can see that it's very much this bangs and whistles and look over here and not over here, over there. A lot of times when you have the Jussie Smolletts and all these things that we're actually putting our attention to and our energy to, there's usually something going on somewhere else. And it does make me wonder if it's because there's been this big sort of rising up in Haiti that they're actually trying to hide right now. And there's this big rising of Aborigine people who are basically saying, this is not all this lying, as Alison rightly said, is just holding up something that is dirty to the core, because there is no truth in it, and it does not stand up to scrutiny. And that's the sad thing, because this is what we notice, that even when their own are caught in the act of lying, they go out of their way to hide the information. Even when their own are coming up with, or not even coming up with, but are discovering really how our plane works, and are able to talk about the electromagnetic aspects of our universe. Therefore, many of the things that we're paying for now would be absolutely free. I mean, Nikola Tesla wasn't the only one. There were many, but he's the one that we're allowed to see. You know, you see how they're able to take the data from the consensus, from the masses, and somehow invert it, turn it around, to use that data for those people who are still able to think a little bit more critically, who don't have short-term memory, who do remember things like thalidomide. See, this is the problem, because what we've got here is a clash. It's just a clash. It's a clash between those people who think they have the authority, and sadly those people who have the authority don't think that we are. They think that we're soulless. We're either an animal or a machine. No, I'm neither. Because when you have that kind of dogmatic belief, then it doesn't, whether there's truth in it, it matters little. Because it's the bully that always wins, you see. So that's why I say, you know, at this point, it's time for us to get wise. You know, they've done a lot to harm us. They've done a lot to fracture us. But those family members, you know, those people in our community, they're real. You know, not the Jussie Smollets of the world, because he won't put food on your table. He's not going to visit grandma with a basket of her favourite goodies. You know, he has no effect on your life whatsoever. But rebuilding those relationships with people around you is what matters. Because, as I said, this is a game. It's a game. It's a distraction at the end of the day. You know, if we're able to rebuild the relationships that matter, then this false paradigm that they have put around us, as Alison rightly said, will just fall apart. But you have to think about it. You know, as you start to unplug as much as you possibly can, then you start to see that, you know, we have to be pretty special. We really do. More than just a little bit special. Because why spend so much time, so much energy, and so much effort on what? Keeping us dumb diversist? That's my new word, by the way, diversist. I know it's not a real word, but I can't help it, because I think that Pope's edict, dumb diversist, sounds like they're like, you know, taking the mickey out of us. Really? You know, what are they saying? Are they too stupid to work out that dumb diversus actually sounds like dumb and diverted? So, say no more. Do your genealogy. You know, these guys, really. Just build relationships with people around you. You know, relationships that matter. Real people that will show you that they care about you at the end of the day. Alright, so do your genealogy. Links are below. Come and join me for the National Geographic article. That's going to be a good one. Lots of information in there about how they deal with children now, because they're doing a lot of experiments on children and actually encouraging our children to lie. So, see you.